everyone, welcome to the Peaceful Palette Art Lesson Series. I am Noelle Rollins. Today we are going to draw an ear with a basic set of 12 Crayola colored pencils. So for supplies today, you'll want the Crayola colored pencil pack. I have a pencil here for sketching and some paper. As a bonus, if you'd like to, you can grab a cotton swab or a paintbrush and some rubbing alcohol or mineral spirits. So let's spend the first few minutes here sketching out this ear. I am using a 2H pencil, so any regular school pencil will work just fine. And I'm using very light pressure, light enough that it'll be colored by the colored pencils or covered by them, but dark enough I can see where I've drawn. So I'm just using a very light hand. I find that it helps me to do some of these smaller shapes, like the inner part first, and then work to do the complete outer side of the ear. It helps give me a little more idea on size when I have something to compare the size to. You can also go back to our first lessons where we showed how to use the grid method or a light board. So what I'm doing here is constantly looking back at my reference photo, and I'm seeing anything I can use to help gauge how wide something should be. Is it a quarter of the way down the ear, halfway down? Things like that. So now I'm noticing that those two dark spots are one above the other, so that helps me make sure I have this area lined up correctly. And sort of like a long figure 8 almost. So now I'm trying to pay attention to how things line up. So like those 3 curved parts all end at about the same vertical line. And the nice thing about sketching really late like this is I'm getting things down, and then I know that I'm going to come back over and redo some of these lines. But it helps me just really start to get the proper shape. In the last lesson, we went ahead and showed how to draw the lines of the ear, what to look for, and then also shading. So if you'd like to know more about drawing and shading an ear, go ahead and watch that video after this. And then the next video I'll do after this is how to do an ear with professional, really high quality colored pencils. So here we have a dark blue. So I often like starting with the darkest colors. And in this one, I figured I'm going to start with the dark blue and really lay out that shadow work. Since the rest of the ear doesn't have a lot of color variance, lots of yellow, orange, pinkish colors, I can go medium, pressure in many areas on this to really create that drastic shadow lines. So I'm using light to medium pressure around the edge of the ear, really capturing that shadow. And then in the darker areas of the reference photo, I'll recreate that using firmer pressure on the pencil. So everybody's ears look a little different. In that ear drawing video, I really tried to show a few different shapes of ears. How the earlobes hang, the different ways that the creases are, and the folds within the ear. So this reference photo is just one example of how an ear may look. At any point during this video, you can go ahead and pause if you need time to catch up. I wanted to just keep this lesson flowing. If we can get the drawing part even 90% right, just spending a few minutes on it, really laying out the ear so that we can really focus on our colored pencil work, that's the goal of this video and lesson. So that we can really spend the time here laying out these shadows, these deeper tones within the ear. So there's a few spots that I'm doing like the line edging when it's a very clear line. Other than that, I'm using, for the most part, small circular strokes. So we're paying attention to how these parts of the ear curve, and we really want to capture how each of these parts are rounded, they're flowing in shape. And so we're really just working to work those shadows in. So we have kind of a double U shape shadow here. Almost. And you can see already with the blue, we're just starting to have the overall feel come together here. Ears can often be an overlooked feature since they aren't always showing, and they're a little confusing since they are always different. So we just want to take some of the mystery out of them. Another tip too, if you find yourself just feeling a little overwhelmed with how something looks when you're trying to recreate it, one tip I have is to flip your reference photo and your paper upside down and draw that either feature or item that you're drawing that way. It tricks your eye into not knowing and trying to fill in the pieces of what it's seeing, which often can happen when we're drawing features. We think we know what an ear looks like, or a nose, mouth and teeth, so we fill in the gaps with what we think we want to see. And sometimes that can just make it hard to accurately see what's actually in front of us. So when we flip it upside down, it just allows our brain to go into a different way of thinking, and we have no choice but to focus on how things actually look to us. So I often do this at portraits towards the end when I'm feeling like I think things are about 98% where they need to be, but there's a few things that I just kind of shaded maybe slightly off the line or a little too heavy shading on something, and I turn it upside down And it's amazing how much that can help me outsmart my own thinking. So here we have the basic brown. I highly recommend just sharpening each of these two before you use them. Just giving you a really nice sharp line. So I'm using medium to firm texture here. Since there isn't a lot of in between the dark and the light points in some parts of the ear, we're just diving right in there and just getting that filled in pretty dark. So using these small circular strokes to really show that that edge of the ear is rounded as well. Even on this part that's shadowed, it's not a exactly like sharp line up at the top of this area. It's a hard line, and then there's a little bit of fuzziness to both sides of the line as the ear curves and comes out of that darker space. So again, just constantly looking back and forth at the reference photo versus what our drawing is looking like. That middle area there isn't too much that we're going to do until we come in with the yellow and orange layers and red to kind of create that peach colored, brighter area. So much of working with colored pencils also is just getting really comfortable with how you hold the pencil. I look like I'm doing tons of fast strokes here, but most of them are very light. Very tiny circles filling in that shading there. And a lot of shading is just using light to medium pressure and just doing multiple layers instead of just pushing harder. Sometimes it just takes a little bit more time to build up that color without over pressing on the paper and kind of flattening all the tooth of the paper. And my hope is that it'll take a few times of learning how to find the ways that work for you to have what look you want to achieve. But that ultimately this will just be a relaxing, calming activity where you can just pull out the box of colored pencils, have a sketch ready, or grab a coloring book and just play. You can have something that you're working on. You can find something in the room that you want to recreate and draw out with the colored pencils. Or you can work on features and just build your confidence in your artwork. Maybe you have in mind that you want to do a portrait gift for someone, or of yourself, or your spouse, or your kids or grandparents. Anyone, and you want to practice. Part of drawing, and I know I've said this several times throughout this video series, is really finding peace and calm and just some time with yourself. And it almost turns into this meditative experience, which is just so nice. Sometimes there's so much going on in the world and it sometimes feels like it's rushing by us and there's too much to keep up with sometimes, and coming and sitting down and drawing like this is just something that you can do to just rebalance everything. Remind yourself that, just a few decades ago, this is what we did. We didn't have endless options to sit and do, and we would just be completely content with whatever was happening in the room we were in. We didn't feel like we were constantly missing out on something else. And I think drawing is part of that. It's you creating your own fun. What I like about using colored pencils as well is I would bring crayons or colored pencils when we'd go up to the cabin, and it's something I could just sit with a pad of paper by the campfire and just create. I would try to draw the leaves that I would see on like a fall day. Sometimes I would draw the stack of wood, maybe something that's laying out. And just these little sketches turned into time capsules of sorts of just the simple life, beauty. So if you're ever looking for something to draw, just look around your room. Find something that's in there. Because we never think things change around us. But sometimes you look back and you see the way that a vase was on the table, and you've captured it with your art. And years later, that's what reminds you of that time of life. That's what I love about the power of art. It's something beyond a photograph. And it's really all about just finding joy in this experience. It helps us build our patience as we can learn to sit in these moments longer and just be fully in our bodies, creating. And I love that it doesn't matter if you're 13 or 93. You can just do the best you can do in that moment, in your unique way that you see things. It is always so fun to see the different ways people capture what they see around them. And sometimes it's easier for us to appreciate that in other people, but hopefully you can see this as a gift to yourself of really helping to strengthen that inner voice that you have and that inner vision. And the way you see the world does matter. And art just captures that. So here we have a very sharp orange pencil. So a lot of this ear is this peachy skin tone, and so I'm coming in with pretty decent pressure in the shadowed areas. But other than that, I'm giving it a really light layer pretty much completely. Even the highlighted areas here are going to need that light orange layer on them. So I'm being careful not to run too far over the edge of the ear or anything, but generally we're just going to give it a good, nice coat of orange. This orange is really going to start to bring in a more realistic look to it now from here on. It takes it from almost black and white feeling to color. And you do whichever way works for you here. If you want to turn your paper, sometimes turning the paper just helps with the angle your hand finds it easiest to draw. And I'm left-handed, so I'm constantly trying to start in the upper right, and I work my way down towards the bottom left. But you do what works for you. It's a little easier with colored pencil to start in any corner since it's not going to smear the same way pencil would. So I'm using a little more pressure here in these shadowed parts. Really in that inner ear towards the ear canal, pretty deep, and then this crease as well in the upper section. If you have any questions at any point during this lesson, you can go ahead and leave a comment for me with your question, and I'll make sure to answer it. And most likely, if you have the question, someone else also has the question and maybe isn't able or doesn't have the courage maybe to ask. So I always appreciate when people step forward and just ask. One thing that was my hope for this art series also is just in different parts of life, we have different needs creatively or different, we're going to use the red here, different needs, I would say. There's certain parts of my life where I probably wouldn't have drawn as much if it wasn't my job, because I was just so tapped out in certain ways. But having this really just gave me some me time and kind of kept something that was my, I guess, just my own. And then as I'm in my 40s now, and I could see how this could even be more so in my 50s and 60s and older, just this deep desire to get to know myself better and to just grow in my creativity. And you may not see it as creativity. For you, it may feel like I want to figure out who I am more. I want to just get to know myself. I want to feel more at peace in my skin. Sometimes we've spent a life just keeping up with everything, and we just want to slow down and sit inside with a candle lit on a rainy day and just be with ourselves. And drawing like this is a perfect way to do that. It's also a really great bonding activity to pull out a coloring book. If you have younger kids in your life, set out a pack of crayons or colored pencils. I always found that just sitting together and drawing, sometimes conversations come up, and it's probably maybe like some people feel about fishing or something like that, where you're doing something, but you can also have this really wonderful conversations while you're doing it. So for nieces and nephews or grandchildren or friends. So you can see this red, we're just really building up what's already there, bringing in that pinkish tone. This is the darker red in the pack. Will later come in with the lighter red. And don't be afraid if the whole thing starts to look a little too pinkish. We're going to balance that back out with some yellows, a little bit of purples. We want to make sure to get those pink tones represented. So just light circular strokes here. We're really just using this red to build that color up on that outer part of the ear that kind of encompasses the whole left and upper side. And you can see how we can use shadowing to really show that the edge of the ear, it's not just flat and it ends, it rounds out. So similar if you were shading a ball or a cylinder, it slowly darkens as the ear curves away from us at the bottom. So now we'll come in with this yellow, and we're pretty much just going to do a solid yellow coat over the entire thing. I'm using pretty light pressure, except for on these darkest places, I'm using medium. We're just bringing this yellow color in. I'm using pretty light pressure in the middle, lighter part there. And the goal with this is just to bring that yellow color in, since the whole thing needs some yellow coloring mixed in. So now we're going to come in with black and really just fill in these few darkest shadowed areas. This will help really bring the contrast between the light and the dark. And just helping us to really make sure we're covering the range from the darkest colors to the light. We don't want to have the whole thing too light overall or too dark. It's amazing how just bringing in some of that just makes everything else pop when there's the contrast. It's amazing, just a little touch of black, just how much it just really created more depth. You can really see the parts that are where it goes into the ear canal, the really darkest parts of the folds. It's amazing what one color can do. So I'm going to come in here with the white and really just, I'm using medium to hard pressure. I'm really just using it to buff out some of these colors. Fill in, especially the lighter colors, I'm using firmer pressure. But then I'm using the white with medium pressure to really blend all these colors together. Using sort of a burnishing technique here. I'm going with the curve of the ear, as you can see. Just really smoothing them all together. You don't see much of a difference with this white. It just acts like exactly what I'm saying. It just blends the colors together with a little bit of wax, smears them together slightly. So now we'll come in with the orange again. We're just going to fill in where we need a little more of that peachy orange tone, where it may have got too yellow. Using pretty light touch for the most part, except for in these areas where I'm working to build up the shadows. You can probably hear my son in the background. That's Aspen. He is my sweet 14-year-old. So here we have the lighter red. This is gonna really come in with really light pressure here over most of this and give us that pinky, beigey sort of feel. So I'm just using circular, long, oval-y type pencil strokes, and I'm just working to pretty much cover almost the entire ear with a really light layer of this red. So it's just pinkening up the entire ear, bringing it away from the yellow tones so much and warming it up a little bit. Using a little bit more pressure here to reinforce these shadows and make sure that this color is built into those shadowing colors. We're almost done here with the ear. The final few layers where we just really make sure that we've covered all our bases. But already, I just think it's so amazing what can be done with a basic pack of a couple dollar colored pencils. So here we're coming in with purple, and this is going to help us really warm up those shadows, bring in some of those skin tone type purples. Sort of a warmer shadow than the black. And it helps us blend some of the shadowing into the regular skin tone as well. So with this purple, I can come in and do the more subtle shadows as well, where haven't built them up too much, but just a light layer of the purple really helps shade in a way that isn't too in your face. So it'll build up that color, allow some of those more subtle shadows to show through as well. And it just kind of has this healthy blood flow sort of feel to it. And so we can look as we're continuing here and we can see that, have we checked off some of the boxes we want to achieve? Have we made sure that the darkest parts are dark enough? Yes. Have we made sure the lightest parts are light enough? Yes. There is definitely contrast here in the ear. We kind of do a once over and make sure, is there anything that we've missed that, you know, this could very easily have been a woman's ear and there's an earring there and now it's time to go in and do the detail of the earring, things like that. Sometimes there might be moles or birthmarks or things like that to show. I'm going to kind of soften out some of those shadows, blend from the black into the other coloring. And then I also like to take a step back and just notice, is there an overall section of shadowing where sometimes my eye can be so focused on the little details that I don't notice that there is a general overall feel to the shadowing. So here we're going to come in with the mineral spirits. I'm just using a very small basic paintbrush, nothing fancy, and we're going to dip it in the mineral spirits and rub off any extra. We want to make sure we don't have too much here. And I try to start at the lighter points, and we're just blending these colors. This mineral spirits is going to break down those waxes a little bit and just help leave us with less of the paper tooth showing through, and also just more of the color saturation once we take apart and break down those binders. So I'm just doing this little wiggling sort of motion here to work that color into the color or the paper fibers. And don't be afraid to dip in and get a little more if you need. And just continue working into that color. Being very strategic. If you happen to touch the darker colors, make sure you don't drag it the wrong way into the lighter colors. And so it's just this almost like a airbrushed filter this does to this, where it just smooths it out just a little bit. I prefer mineral spirits odorless if you're able to do those. They have a bottle at dickblick.com where you can also get colored pencils. You can get the advanced color pencil set that I work from in many of my videos from there as well. Also hardware stores, home improvement stores, places like that. And now I'm just coming in with the purple. While the mineral spirits are wet, I can come in and really notice anywhere that needs just additional shading or coloring added. The mineral spirits really helps break down that color, so it just comes in such a great, vibrant way. If you use rubbing alcohol, make sure to wait about 15 minutes until it's completely dry, and then you can come in and do this last couple minutes here. So again, I'm coming in with a lighter red, and I'm just pinkening it up. I feel like it's a little too yellow in tone. I want to just bring it back a little bit more of the peachy color. So that's what I'm working to do here. So just nice and easy, just really finishing up these final touches to bring the pink back in. And so there we have it. There is our completed ear. Let me know what you think of this video in the comments. If you have any questions, give it a like if you've enjoyed this time together. And I hope you'll subscribe and be a part of all of the Peaceful Palette Art Lesson series. I thank you so much for spending this time together. And I hope you have a really wonderful day. Thanks so much. Bye.